Hi guys.
Hello.
We have a lovely pleasure for you now. Simon Fisher-Becker, this lovely gentleman here, who may even wave at you if you're lucky. That's Simon Fisher-Becker right there from Doctor Who. So have a big round of applause for Simon Fisher-Becker! Now Simon, bless him, has taken his autobiographical show all over the world. The first part, My Dalek Has a Puncture. The second part, My Dalek Has Another Puncture. And now I am very proud to announce the world exclusive of the third and final part of his trilogy autobiographical show, Let Zygons Be Zygons. So without further ado, a big round of applause for Simon Fisher-Becker.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you everyone at Fantasticon. It's always marvellous coming here, and I need to thank Dan personally for being the person brave enough to publish my first book. And I also need to make a public apology for not making my deadlines for the second book. But it will be out next year along with Let Zygons Be Zygons and an audio version of all three books, hopefully. Whee! For those of you who don't know, I am a very lucky soul that I appear in Doctor Who with Matt Smith in 4 episodes as a curious character called Dorian Moldovar. And because of that, I get to come to marvellous events like this, not only in Hull, the city of culture looming, but also literally all over the world, which is fantastic. And when I first started on the sci-fi circuit, people were asking for an autobiography. So this is how it all came about. So My Dalek Has a Puncture talks about my early life and what happened to me personally, as well as some friends, up until the point I was off with Dorian Moldovar. My Dalek Has Another Puncture only highlights really that at the time I had no real imagination, so I couldn't think of another title. Tells the story of what happened when I was appearing and filming Doctor Who, and how, as a result, I'm now an ambassador for several charities. I get to travel the world to talk about anti-bullying and spat on as well. It's the whole mixture of things of this wonderful, glorious world that we live in. So why have I chosen Let Zygons Be Zygons? I'm in serious danger of this final part of the trilogy of being very downbeat, and I'm determined not to make it so. But the first 2 books highlights not only the wonderful times I've had, not only the wonderful friends I've had, but also the nasty interruptions in life, shall we say, and the bullying that takes place, not only for me personally, but other people as well. And so there's a danger of that, but hopefully towards the end, you will find things are a lot lighter than they start out. I chose Let Zygons Be Zygons because my grandmother continuously used to say to me, just let bygones be bygones. So, of course, keeping in with the Doctor Who theme, that's how it all came about. And she always said to me, try and leave your baggage at the front door. So, what's your baggage and what's my baggage? The main thing I've had to deal with, and those of you who read the first book will know, is false accusations all the time. It's very, very difficult when you know you're absolutely innocent of anything and finding that all around you not only won't believe a word you say, but they'll say things like, no need to say anything, it'll all be lies, all be lies. Or if you're accused of something and you're trying to defend yourself, saying it, but it wasn't me, wasn't it me? What I used to get a lot at school was, well, if it wasn't you, who was it? And that's very hard to take, especially when you're 6 or 7 years old. An example I quote when I was at school, because the school years are called funny different things nowadays. In my day, you went to infant school and junior school and then to senior school. And so I'm going to keep that. Lord knows what years that is meant. I have no understanding because I have a brain that can only talk about infants, junior and senior school. I mean, what on earth does year 12 mean? I do. You know, it means nothing to me. Right, but there we go. So in the junior school, I used to go home to dinner at lunchtime, and don't know why, I can't remember why, but that was the arrangement. I came back from lunch one day to be told I had to report to the head teacher, and the head teacher promptly gave me the cane. That was a long time ago. Just took my hand and went whack like this. And in my utter shock, I actually asked what that was for. So I got another whack for being insolent. But it actually turned out that a football had been kicked through a precious window, not dissimilar to the one that's behind me, and in fact in front of me now, at the school, and it was reported that I had kicked the football. Now, I couldn't have kicked the football. One, my legs aren't long enough. I could never kick a football. And two, I wasn't there. I was at lunch at home. But this was disbelieved totally. And when my grandmother phoned the school to complain, she was told, there's no need to deny it. The entire school saw him do it. And this really ate at me very badly, because only a few years earlier, hanging had been abolished in the UK. And all I could think was, had I been accused of this, say 3 or 4 years earlier, maybe I would be standing on the gallows right now, because the entire school saw me kick the football through a window. And that ate at me. And that's when my grandfather said, that's a lesson, boy. Life can sometimes deal from the bottom of the pack, and you just need to find ways of dealing with it. And my grandmother used to say, always try and find a silver lining. But when you are about 6 or 7 and you're thinking, I could have died because I'm being falsely accused, it's very difficult to find a silver lining. And another example of things I don't like is malicious gossip. We've all experienced it, and I think 1 or 2 people have maybe contributed to it. I mean, there's always the things of Chinese whispers. I, for example, was once told that my sister was going to shoot the Pope. Where on earth does that come from? And what it turned out is there was a teacher at my sister's school called Mrs. Pope, and that she'd had a bit of an argument about some homework, and my sister had said, I wish I could shoot her. So saying, I wish I could shoot a school teacher who happened to be called Mrs. Pope, my sister then suddenly becomes accused that she's going to try and shoot the Pope. Very silly nonsense. And it is, most of it is very silly and trivial, and handbags at dawn. But, you know, to young children, that sort of thing can seem much, much more dangerous and sinister than it actually is. And that can eat away at your psyche and start thinking that you're worthless and pointless. Another thing, of course, particularly being large, a lot of people assume because I'm large, I sit on a sofa all day long eating donuts and Mars bars. I will confess I did enjoy the wagon wheels this morning, and I'm sorry they're all gone, but I did enjoy them totally. Why that is, why people have this assumption, I don't know. And nowadays, particularly in the media, they like to highlight the extremes of any situation. You know, on what's the program? The silly program in the morning, Good Morning, or This Morning, is it called? if they want to highlight something about obesity, they'll always have the candidate who does have 37 burgers for breakfast, who does sit and eat half a cow for lunch, who does not stop eating all day long. But not all large people are bothered about food. It's always amused me at my very slim and skinny colleagues. They're sitting eating breakfast and then talking about what they might have for lunch. Whereas I don't. I'm a large person. I never really think about what I'm going to eat until the time. I think, oh, I'm hungry. What do I fancy? Very, very strange. And also, as some of you know, I am somewhat infirm nowadays. And I find that there is discrimination in the workplace. I don't care what anybody says. The assumption is if you're disabled, you can't work. So when you hear all these stories about disabled people living off of benefits, it's all a scam, you know, they're just benefit cheats, you know. And I heard the most extreme example a couple of weeks ago, too fat to work. What sort of crap is that? From my experience, the assumption is because I'm large and I'm slightly immobile, then I'm non-productive, I'm lazy, and I'm going to cause problems for the company. So despite the Equalities Act, they won't employ you. And I challenge anyone in HR to disagree with that. And having worked in HR, I know that they can't disagree with that. And it's those sort of things that really do my goat. I get really pissed off about it. But I've been very lucky in the profession I now follow. The BBC in particular have been very kind towards me. On Doctor Who, they had wheelchairs, they had scooters, they had comfy chairs for me. So they took into consideration my issues and didn't allow it to affect me so I could try and do a decent job. Also, I was involved in a TV series called Puppy Love, in which the character I played was specifically written for me with my mobility issues in mind. So I was very chuffed about that. So I say hooray to the BBC. I'm yet to wait for the script to come through from ITV and Sky. I'll let you know about it when it comes along. Another example of discrimination at work, there was one place I was working at and a fire alarm went off, and in the building people had to come down the back of the building, down the staircase, and then congregate in a car park. And it was reported the following day that there was a blockage on the staircase, people couldn't get out, and that it was me, Mr. Fatty and Mr. Slow, who was causing the blockage. What nobody knew, and only CCTV could reveal, was at the time that there was the fire alarm, I was already in the car park, because I was going off to a meeting somewhere else, at a satellite office, and I was loading my car with all the bits and bobs that we needed for the meeting. So when I spoke to HR and I asked them to check the CCTV, they were very apologetic. And to my amazement, they immediately offered me a £500 bonus and 2 golden holidays that I had to take by a certain time period. That's how scared they were. They thought, because they knew I have an HR background, that I would be demanding compensation. And so people making assumptions is another thing that really irritates me. I had an incident recently where a very good friend assumed something because of the way they saw something, and so therefore I was guilty. And I wasn't really given the opportunity to defend myself. And that sort of thing hurts, even now, at the age of 55, that sort of thing really, really hurts and really annoys me. Another example of something, a rumor that can go around that you have no control over, is Game of Thrones. A rumour went around, thank you, Cult Box, saying that I was to appear in Game of Thrones. And the first I knew about it was a friend sent me an email with a strapline saying, congratulations. Open up the email, then there's a link to this article from Cult Box saying, Doctor Who actor to appear in Game of Thrones. And lo and behold, there was a wacky great big photograph of me as Dorian Moldovan. I contacted Cult Box, and they haven't removed the article at all. It's not me at all. The actor who was also a Doctor Who actor was in fact David Very, who was offered. What I can say is I did audition for the same role. I did get recalled for the same role, but I actually wasn't offered the role at all at any time. But to add to the bizarreness of it all is if you go to Wiki Thrones online and type in my name, there's a little section saying I was offered the role, but then it was recast. Where that comes from, I have no idea, but it is something that irritates me, because since then, the casting director, Nina Gold, hasn't called me in for anything. So I feel, rightly or wrongly, that little article has persuaded Nina Gold not to call me in for things. It's probably untrue, but that's just the way I feel. But it's another example of a rumour that gets out of hand and you can't get it retracted. I'm often asked if I'm superstitious, because you mustn't mention or quote anything from the Scottish play. Things like that. Well, I don't know, am I superstitious? I really don't think so. Some people say they think I've got a bit of OCD. But I wouldn't say I've got OCD, but I would agree that I do have a lot of routines. I like to pack my case in a certain order. But that's nothing to do with OCD. That's because putting it in a certain order, visually, I can see the things are in there when I'm checking. Because sometimes we get a call to fly off somewhere at short notice. So to be able to open up my case, check what's in there, it's in the right space, really works. But some people say I've got OCD, and they think if you've got OCD, there's a problem there. The biggest issue I had recently, well, when I say recently, in the last year or so, thankfully, due to the hard work of my manager, some of you know Matt Campbell, I ended up on a 3-month tour doing not only sci-fi conventions, but book signings and also talks. And amongst my ailments, I have osteoarthritis. I have permanent damage to my spine because somebody attacked me. And so I'm in constant pain. So when I knew I was going to go off on this 3-month tour, I contacted my doctors to say, could you give me 3 months' supply of painkillers? Because normally they only give you it for about 30 days. What happened next was I got a phone call from my doctor asking me to come in for a consultation. And sat me down, was very concerned. And he just asked me, do you want to speak to a therapist? I said, sorry. We're concerned that you may be feeling depressed. Depressed? Where did that come from? Well, you've asked for 3 months' supply of painkillers. So I then had to sit there and explain, I'm going away for 3 months and I don't want to have to come back to you and break the journey. See? And who made the assumption? Not the doctor. It was the receptionist. I asked for 3 months' supply of painkillers, and she reports to the doctor possible depression here. And where I live, they're very high on catching people who are depressed. So I'm very pleased that they felt I might have been and they wanted to help me. But I was going to swear there. Let's just say bloody annoyed that I had to waste my time to go to a doctor to say I'm not depressed, I'm just in pain and I need some pain relief. Other things that took me by surprise when I first appeared in Doctor Who, and subsequently, because I get to appear on television quite a lot, a lot of people assume I have the same bank balance as Matt Smith. And not only family, but friends. The number of friends who've actually outrightly asked if I could pay off their mortgage. I think that's very cheeky. I mean, I would like to help. If I had a lot of money, I would help as many people as I could, because that's the sort of person I am. But to be asked and then get very indignant when you say, well, actually, at the moment, I haven't the funds. Well, you're on the telly every week. I see you, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, because they assume I earn £1 million a year. And, of course, they don't believe you don't, because they've read in The Sun that Matt Smith's on £4 million a year. Fucking hell, Simon must be on £4 million a year. Let's see. I'll get him to pay off my mortgage. It's very strange. And also, I have a very extended family, and free admit, I don't know half of them. I know of them. I've not met any of them, or not met some of them. And then for them to suddenly come out the woodwork and ask for, it's not, can you buy me a bag of food? It's thousands of pounds at a time. And I've had some very difficult times. And so that's another thing that adds to my baggage. It's not that I don't want to be helpful, because on the other side of the coin, one of my treats for me is when I do have money, or bits to spare, I like to catch up with friends and take them out to dinner. Most of the friends are very nice and very kind and very willing to come along and catch up. But there are one or two of them who take the view, I'm just flashing my money around, so I can't win. I'm either a stingy goat for not paying off somebody's mortgage, or if I invite them to dinner, I'm flashing my money around. Another suitcase to put on my baggage list. It's really irritating, and in some cases it can be considered bullying. Talking of which, one of my joys since being on the circuit is I've been asked to talk and support anti-bullying groups. And all I do is just go along and talk about what happened to me, and that seems to help people. They find that very motivational, and they think I get a lot of fat people who are very happy and pleased and come up and give me a hug because I call myself fat. Because a lot of people like to have FAT removed from the lexicon. So, I don't know. I am fat. I've always been fat. I've been bullied for being fat. I've been criticised for being fat. I've been told I'm going to die young because I'm fat. So, as I reminded my very skinny friend who I had to bury last week, who's 20 years younger than me. So, I do go around giving talks and support to people who have been bullied, and I really, really enjoy it. But the bullying is coming back closer to home. I mentioned Matt Campbell. He's now officially my manager for these events. He takes me around the world and helps me out. He gets me work. And he first joined me because he came and saw my first show. And those who saw my first show, I used the phrase, "Don't be afraid to ask." And he came and asked if he could be my helper. Now, I'm going to be free and honest here. At the time, I thought, hello, he wants to get into these events free. But if he's helping me out, why not? So that's how it all started. But he turned out to be quite exceptional. Very hard-working, a delight to be with. And he suddenly one day gave me a phone call and said, I think I've got you another event. What's this? Because up until this point, most of the sci-fi things, either your organisers contacted me direct, or I contacted them. And then this happened 3 or 4 times. And then when Dan published my first book, Matt arranged a book tour for me, and it was very, very good. But he's very young. He only celebrated his 19th birthday last week, which means at the time of this conversation, he was coming up to 18. So for his 18th birthday, I officially announced he could be my PA. And then he got more and more events for me. So by December last year, Matt had managed to fill my diary with all sorts of events for almost the whole of 2016. And of course this got around, and I had Ian McNeice come to me. Those of you know Ian McNeice. Bert Large in Doc Martin, he played Winston Churchill in Doctor Who. And Ian asked if I minded if Matt found him a few events. So I then said to Matt, do you know, if other celebrities are going to ask you, why don't you start up your own agency? And that's what he did. So from the 1st of January 2016, Campbell Celebrity Booker was opened, known as CCB. Unknowingly to both he and me, this caused a bit of a ruffle. And we both started getting emails saying that Matt was being unprofessional, or they didn't like the way Matt was working. Matt is stealing our clients. And this was coming from other bookers. And apparently it's very bad for somebody at one of these events to hand over a business card. Matt was being accused of touting for business, which isn't allowed. How dare he, you see? He was accused of stealing or poaching other clients. Now, for those of you who don't know, actors have an agent for all their acting work, and that generally is just a one-to-one relationship, an exclusive relationship. But when it comes to the sci-fi conventions and things like that, we have bookers, and we can all have 4, 5, or 6 bookers if we wanted. And this is mainly because Booker A may only deal with Canada. Booker B may only deal with New South Wales in Australia. No one booker books for every event. Whereas being an actor, I want to be able to be anywhere. So that's why you have more than one booker. But Matt is very good at getting work in, and this ruffled a few people's feathers. And one of the complaints was that it's nothing but self-promotion. Because on his website, it's called Campbell Celebrity Booker, there's a little photograph of him. And this was felt self-promoting and not the done thing. Now, I don't know about you, but most websites, I had to go and look up my solicitor's new address recently, and on the website, there's a photograph of all the solicitors. And what's wrong with that? He was then accused of demanding contracts, and that this isn't the done thing. So the person who said this to me, I said, well, if you're offering me work and you're not willing to sign a contract, then I don't want to do the job. And they looked back and gasped. He's doing nothing wrong at all. And then the other main criticism was that he was bombarding people with emails and tweets asking to come along. Excuse me, I just swallowed a fly. What I will own up to is when Matt first started in January, I emailed, tweeted, Facebook messages to everybody I know to introduce him. That was in January. And tell me what new company does not say, hello, I'm here. If you want me, come and see me. I got business cards. What new company doesn't do that? But for some reason, this was wrong. So what we have both had to suffer recently particularly a Facebook campaign accusing us of being unprofessional and that other organisers should be wary of us. As a result, I will admit, I got chucked out of an event. I got chucked out. I went as a punter. I hadn't been as a punter before, and I got chucked out of an event, and I own up, that was it. But since then, the rumour is that Matt and I get chucked out of hundreds of events. And there are people writing to some organisers in America in particular, warning them off us, and so we have lost work for 2017. And on Facebook, one of the contributors suggested that the accusers should go to the police and so sort of warn the police about what we're doing. So we sat back a moment and we thought, well, we'll go to the police first and check exactly what's what. So are these bullies, because that's what they are they guilty of cyberbullying, which is very hot? Are they guilty of corruption, harassment, restriction of trade, slander or libel? Don't know, it's very difficult. Spoke to the police. We can't get them on harassment because they haven't said they're going to come and chop our head off. We can't really get them on cyberbullying because likewise they haven't said we're going to come and try and cut their... I was going to say something rude, but let's just say they haven't actually said anything violent. As for slander and libel, we have a very strong case. And also these bullies started saying we should name and shame them, because at first they didn't name us, they just implied us. But lo and behold, I got mentioned, and so we've been outed, as if it were. They've named and shamed. So in return, I only think it's right I should name and shame my accusers. If you could read very quickly, this is who they are. Right, I shall move on. You'll have to buy the book to find their details exactly. So how do I deal with my baggage? The answer is there are a lot of broken tables and the cat has got a few bruises. All right? But many years ago I was in pantomime in Grimsby. I was an ugly sister, and the delightful Jill Greenacre was our Cinderella, and at the time she was 6 months pregnant. But one of the things she was very hot on is what some people would call hippie power. But what she did with us at Christmas, she told us, if you have got this baggage, make a list. Make 2 lists. Make a list of all the good things you want to take over to the next year. And then make a list of all the bad things, your baggage, that you want to be able to discard. Now, I was a bit sceptical at this at the time, I will admit. But the digs we had was on a fishing farm where there were fishing lakes, and we stayed in the chalets. And what Jill said to do is we walk down to the lake, we fold up the list of all the good things we want to take over to next year and place them in a hiding place and keep them close to you. Then all the bad things, your baggage, just write it down on a list and then put them in a little pot. We put them in a little pot and then we set fire to it. And then we went down to the lake and we cast all the ashes of all the baggage we had upon the lake. Now, and it was done at about midnight, so it was very spooky. And I have to tell you, I'm not so sceptical now, because I haven't got rid of all my baggage. I mean, a lot of the baggage will stay with me for a very long time. But I've got rid of most of it in doing that exercise, and what still remains with me is I could deal with better. And me personally, I always have the view things can only get better. I've been saying that for 55 years. And then, of course, we had our political shenanigans this year, which make me doubt that phrase. But things will always be better, and there is always a silver lining. And my biggest example of that was in 2009, I was attacked, and that's why I've got my damaged back. And I couldn't do panto in 2009, but the silver lining was I was available for the audition to play Dorim in Doctor Who. So I wasn't in panto, but I was in Doctor Who, and I'm now here as a result. So fates are very strange, I must admit. Sorry about that. That's my "you've been wittering on too long, fuck off" call. All right. So as a result of being beaten up badly, I get an audition for Doctor Who. I travel the world. I meet fantastic people like yourselves. I have a publisher who is publishing my autobiography, which is a trilogy. So there's My Dalek Has a Puncture, My Dalek Has Another Puncture, and of course today is the start of Let Zygons Be Zygons. But as a result, people ask me all sorts of questions, and they highlight things that have happened to them, that I'm now being persuaded to create a second trilogy. And as a result of something that happened today, I can tell you that the first book of the second trilogy will be Dalek Stole My Parking Bay. So on that note, I say thank you very much for coming along. If you have any questions, feel free to come to my table, and I can talk to you for hours if you're not already bored. And so until then, thank you all for coming along. Bye-bye.
Simon Fisher-Becker, everyone! Woo! Yep. Do go see Simon in the table at the back. Your book's on sale now, is it? Your book's on sale, is it?
Yes.
So then,
Dan's got a selection of my books. You come to my table, I have some books as well, and photographs, and it'll be very nice to see you.
and blue face paint as well, if you maybe. I'm not sure. Dan, I'll hand back.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Simon. That was awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir.